Hey, this is Jay from Stitchin' Time in Bemidji, Minnesota, and I want to say congratulations on your new Handi Quilter. At least I assume that's what is happening because you're looking at this beginning quilting video series on how to get started successfully with your new Handi Quilter. I want to congratulate you because we have had the privilege of helping over 120 people start their quilting journey. And I call it a quilting journey because you are embarking on a journey. There's going to be some rough spots along the way. There's going to be some amazing sights. You're going to have a lot of aha moments. And there's going to be some questions along the way. We always have to stop and ask for directions sometimes from somewhere, right? Well, at least if you're not a man, you have to. Just teasing. No, it's just part of the journey is recognizing we're going into new territory we've never been before. And that's why we see it as a journey where you travel together and we can have a part in that, and we're grateful for that. I wanted to tell you our goal for this series is to give you confidence to start. Nothing disappoints me more than when I sell a beautiful quilting system to a lady and then I come back a year later to do the initial training all over again and she hasn't even turned it on. Because then I feel like, did I not do a good job? Did I not help them have the confidence to be able to start? And I get it. The first time you do it, you're scared. But the goal of this series is to help you actually start loading a quilt and getting it quilted and finding little tips and tricks along the way. Maybe you've done a dozen quilts, but it still isn't going very smooth. Well, that's what our goal is to help you find the things that can help put the joy back in your quilting. I'm going to start with two assumptions, okay? And these are important assumptions. Number one is I'm going to assume that your dealer set up your machine. And why do I say that that's important? Well, we're required by Handi Quilter to offer setup for your machines. Doesn't matter whether it's a Moxie or the whole way up to the Infinity. We're required to offer that. We're not required to do it for free like we do here at our store, but dealers are required to offer it. And it's important to know that because there's little tips and tricks along the way that you may not know because it's your first time doing it. Whereas for us, we've done it so many times, we don't even need to look at the manual anymore because we know exactly what settings to put for the pole height and all the other sorts of things. Recently, I just adopted a customer from a few hours away because their dealer was kindly enough to help them load the machine into the back of their car after they spent $12,000 with them, but then just waved at him and says, call, if you have any questions, here's the 800 number for Handi Quilter. They didn't want to do any of the work. They said, well, we don't assemble those ones because it was not their premium model. And that was really sad because that customer struggled for a year for a problem that was built into the machine. We just went down there last week and found out that we could have saved them a year of frustration if they would have had the dealer come out and look at it first thing, because there was a little bit of a problem. You know, and that's the thing is I can't promise you'll never have a problem with your machine. But when we sell a machine or when we adopt a machine, I can promise you won't have to go through it alone. And that's what the goal is of this video is to try and help you learn some of these things so you don't have to do that. But it means that you're going to need to make sure your machine is leveled, that the poles are in all the proper positions, that the height adjustments are set correctly. And I'm not going to necessarily focus on those things on this series. If you want to contact us to see about setting up a Zoom time where we can charge you to show you how to do all those things, we can. But that's something your dealer is supposed to do. The second assumption is that your dealer gave you some sort of a demo. And that's incredibly important because if you don't know what your machine is capable of, how will you know how to get it to do it? You know, you're embarking on a new world that you don't know where all the roads go. You've heard about them from other people, but you don't know. And that's where if you can get to classes, if you can get to have your dealer sit down and show you what are all the things you can do with this machine, what are some of the tips and tricks, you know, that way when you get into your quilting, you kind of go, oh, that's right. Jay said something about that. And I don't remember quite how he said to fix it, but I know there's a fix for it. And that's where you find your answers because then you know how to ask those questions. If you've never had that kind of demo from your dealer, I would encourage you to find another dealer who's hosting a van event or a truck event and go there and take their 2-day beginner classes, because it is very, very valuable for your time to be able to learn all the features of your machine, and you're going to learn a ton of more stuff than what you can remember. But once you get into quilting, those bells will go off and you'll know who to call to ask those questions. So in this series, we're going to teach a whole bunch of things. We're going to teach how to load a quilt properly. We're going to show how to wind a bobbin. And there are right and wrong ways to do that, because you can end up with a lot of really goofily wound bobbins, which is going to make your tensions be all messed up. We're going to show you how to thread your machine. And we're going to go through that because there's some very key things that I see a lot of new beginners struggling with. And as I watch the Facebook groups and I see a lot of people struggling with that, you know, we're going to go through that and take some really close-up pictures and watch and take you step by step in how to get through that. We're going to show you how to adjust your tensions. Oh boy, tensions is something we work with all the time, but you have to kind of know the physics of what's happening behind it so you know how to make those adjustments. And you need to get past the fear factor of changing your tensions, because tensions is something that you have to adjust on almost every quilt. And I know there's going to be all the naysayers out there say, oh, I haven't touched my tensions in 4 years. Well, that's probably because they're making the exact same quilt in a row for 4 years and using the exact same thread, bobbins, and, you know, and batting. Well, not all of us quilt like that. And you should be able to go from embroidery thread to king tut to omni to glide. You should be able to do those things with your machine. And we're going to try and help take some of those mysteries out for you. We're going to show you how to change a needle. Changing a needle is probably one of the biggest things that I see one of my newbies beginning to struggle with, because I traveled 2.5 hours away one day because they said, my machine, I changed the needle and it's in there properly, everything's perfectly exactly like it was before, and it still won't stitch. It won't pull up the bobbin thread, nothing. Well, I drove 2.5 hours up there and her needle was perfectly straight, but 180 degrees. It was wrong. Other times I've seen it just 10 degrees out of rotation and it's starting to shred the thread, and they're convinced that something happened to their machine. Well, I'm going to show you a little tip. I'm going to show you a little tool that you can get that'll help you with that and to make that your life a lot simpler. We're also going to show you the basic operations of your machine. Both, we're going to have 2 classes on that. One is going to be on the Amara Infinity series, which is going to have a little different screen layout, and the other is going to be on the Moxie and the Moxie XL, because those have different screen layouts as well. But to understand, how do you get into menus? How do you change settings? Especially on the Moxie. That one's not as intuitive. It takes a little bit of finesse to get around, and if we can hold your hand through that, that would be great. So we're going to get started here today with loading a quilt and how to do it properly, and then we're going to have the others recorded in the next few weeks. So stay tuned, and I welcome you to start your quilting journey. Okay, as you can see, we're standing here. We have our quilt top here ready. We have our quilt backing, and I'm just going to set the quilt top out of the way for right now. So the way I describe it is this: when you're trying to lay out your quilt here, pretend you're standing at the foot of the bed. And it's important that you choose either the foot or the side. Like if you're going to lay your quilt out so it's sideways on the quilt, you have to stand at the side of the bed. But most of the time, we set it up so that we load it at the foot of the bed. So I'm going to build my quilt. And if you had a quilt laying on your bed, would you put the backing on the bed? We're going to build it just like it's laying on the bed. Would you put the good side up or the good side down? Well, if you think about it, whenever the quilt is on the backing, if you take the backing, do you want the good side facing down or the good side facing up? Well, if your quilt is on the bed, the good side is going to be facing down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my backing here. I got a really nice wide one. And I'm just going to throw it over top here like this. Like I'm throwing it out over top of the bed. And I like to throw it completely over because it gives it time for the fabric to kind of ease out there a little bit. And it also makes it easier to load up than when you're working with this. And so the first thing I'll do then is I'll find the middle of my backing. Now just remember, your backing should always have at least 2 inches wider the whole way around than your top. And that's to clamp your side clamps onto. That is to give you a little extra room if your top isn't quite perfectly square, you know, so you need to do that. And so what I'm going to do here is I've made a crease and I'm going to fold and I'm going to put that pin right in the crease. Now, it will be a little hard to see there. And now I'm going to just shake it all out here. And my backing is now on the quilt, or on the bed. And now I need to go to my first pole, the one that's closest to me. We're setting up in the traditional method, which is the way I teach all of you when you first get your machine from us. You can do clear view. We're not going to talk about that in this one. But I'm going to start with the belly bar that's closest to me. And there's going to be leader marks that are going to be marked onto your poles. And there's also going to be leader marks marked on here. That's the center of my leader. And so I don't know if you can see that up there. I'm just folding them up so they're both together. And I line up the pin directly with my backing. And then I transfer it through just like that. Okay, so you can see that I got that, still got that pin there, center's lined up. So now as I'm pinning across here, what I'll do is I'll take big bites with my pins. So you notice that you can see how big of a bite we're getting on the back side there. And you want between 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch between the tip of this pin and the head of this one. It's just a quick way of visualizing where you're going. And so I'm just going to keep working my way across here. You want to try and keep all of your pins about the same distance from the edge of the fabric, because otherwise you end up with a wavy edge, and we don't want that. And we will and then we will finish this up the whole way across the other side. Now, one of the things that we're doing here is that I pin easier from the center to the left because I'm right-handed. And to pin going this way is not as easy for me. So what I end up doing is I go out about every 10 inches and I will baste this in with a pin. And then I will go the whole way down to the very end and then pin my way back. And so that way I can just keep pinning from this direction. And you want to keep all your pins going the same direction, because when you go to pull this out, nobody likes blood on their quilt. And you want the pins all going the same direction so you can pull them out all the same way. Otherwise, you will shish kebab your fingers, and you will be wondering why someone doesn't warn about that when they are making these videos. So I'm going to go ahead and get this finished pinned on this way, and then I'll give you some pictures to show you what this looks like when it's all nicely pinned on. Okay, so now we have our quilt all pinned on here, and we are going to get ready. Oh boy, so there's some leftovers. That's what we'll put them on the floor. That's what vacuums are for. And we're going to roll this up on here. So the biggest thing is when you're rolling this, if you don't know which way to roll your quilt, just engage your ratchets at the end. You know, that's just to put them down so that you hear them going click, 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 click when you roll them. And so now I'm going to roll it up here the first little bit. And this is where you want to make sure that your edges are all smoothed out, that it's rolling up nicely. And what I will do is I'll take my fingers and I'll run along the pole like this, and that helps smooth it out. You don't want to be tugging on one side more than the other, because what will happen is you will turn a wonk into your backing, and no one wants a wonky backing. That's just not okay. and that's going to make a lot of fussing with later. So I'm just working this out, making sure that it's all laying flat. And I can see that because of the weave of this fabric, it's wanting to just to coast that way a little bit. So I just keep pulling it back here and just keep smoothing it out, rolling it up. And if you square up your quilt back, this should roll up really nice and evenly on the other side. If you don't square up your quilt back, you may wonder what you're doing, because you really want this laying on here flat. That is really important to keep it laying on here. You don't want to have it shifted one way or the other, because that's going to make a lot of headache for you later. And it looks like we're coming out here pretty good. And look at that. That's pretty nice and straight along there. So now the back is all rolled up and we're good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is do the top. So again, we're standing at the foot of the bed and we're going to put our quilt top out. Now this is a fun little storm at sea variation that I had done. I'll just show you what it looks like here. There you go, you can see it. And so now I'm standing at the foot of the bed, I'm building my quilt. My finished quilt, the good side is going to be up, right? Okay, so now I'm going to put the good side up. And what's the first thing we do? We find the middle of our top. That's correct. So, these are my pins. I can do that. I can stick them in my mouth. By the way, these are big, almost like corsage pins that are really stiff. They're not always the sharpest when they come from Handi Quilter, but I'll tell you what, they are a whole lot nicer than some of the yellow sewing pins that I've had before, because those ones tend to be very soft and they're easier to move in, like remove when you're sewing up close to the needle or something like that. But these ones are the ones you want for pinning on your quilts because they're good and stiff. So I pull out. Look, I got a seam right there in the middle. We're just going to use that seam. And we're going to say that is our center. Okay. And now we already have something on here. So we're just going to reach down and grab our leader cloth here. And that also has a center mark on it. And again, I put these two pieces here. So it looks like this. So they're both coming up like this, and then we're pinning through it this way, okay? So I'm not folding them over, I'm not lapping them, I'm bringing both of them up just like praying hands. Think of it like praying hands. And I line up the center with my center of my quilt, and I transfer that through. And now I'm ready to pin this on just like I did before. I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we got the top all pinned on here now. And again, I can just drop that down in here. Whoops. I like to keep, again, that's over there on the far side of that. How do we wrap this up here? Well, I engage my ratchet, and that forces me to roll it. It's going to roll backwards from the other direction, but that forces me to roll it up the right way. And now this is going to be a little different one because I have all my pieces, and you'll be able to see some lines running down this pole. And so it's important that we try to keep those lines all running evenly across here. This is a smaller quilt, so it's not that big a deal. And what I'll do is I'll start in the middle, I'll work my way out, and I'll work my way out there so that it kind of takes, fabric naturally wants to shrink in towards the middle. And we want it nice and flat. And if you press your fabric before you put it on here, that'll help you. But if you're lazy like me, I don't always press it right before I put it on there. This one was pressed. I even pressed my seams open. Do I get extra brownie points for that? I hope so, because it was a pain. But so now I'll wind up 2 there, and now I can stretch this out here. If you have to, if some of these aren't lining up, you can do a little massaging it, practice your masseuse skills to get them lined up straight again. And then you go up and do the next one. Oh, now see here, I'm getting off a little bit. So I'm going to roll this back just a little bit. Start in the middle, work my way out. Yep, get it down there. And then so now you can see it's looking pretty good. Got a nice straight line across there. And we're going to do one more. And I'm going to bring that out a little bit. Bring this out this way. Massage it a little bit, get it straightened up. The bigger quilt you have, the bigger the quilt you have, the more you'll have this of an issue. Because you have a lot more folds in the middle than I do in my borders, because there's a lot more fabric in there. So you'll have to just kind of work that in there a little bit as you roll it up. See? And there we go. And the top is all on. Now we're going to get ready to pin the backing to the take-up leader. I'll show you that in a bit. Okay, there are many ways you can pin the backing onto the take-up leader. I'm standing on the back side of the machine right now, but I'm going to show you the way that I find is easiest to do, as long as you can get around to the back of your machine. Most of the new machines come with a super leader, which will reach the whole way up to the front, but then I find I'm still trying to hold those 2 pieces and pin them together, and it doesn't always go quite as easily as what I'd like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my leader cloth. It's going to be hanging down behind both poles, under the bottom of it, and around to the top. And I'm going to do that over the whole length. This is a 10-foot frame here. You may have a 12-foot or you may have an 8-foot moxie. That is okay. But you want the whole thing. So it's wrapping the entire pole. And I have a little bit extra hanging over on the top side here. Now I'm going to take my quilt backing. I'm going to reach front, and I had it hanging down there close to the floor. And what I'm going to do here now is I want you to notice I'm not going to mark the center here, because I find it's easiest if I just do it here. See, I can tell just by laying it down here whether it's flat on here or not. I know my leader cloth is wound up here nicely, and so I can just simply, I can make sure my edges are pretty close here, and then just simply by shifting it left or right a little bit, I can tell exactly where it needs to be. And then on the back side, I'm still going to go and then just pin my quilt like I normally would. Now, why do I always go through the leader cloth first? Well, it's important, because if I'm putting my pins in on the weaker side of the fabric, the more flexible fabric, it's going to be, when we start tensioning our quilt, it's going to start pulling against the ends of those pins, and it's easy for it to go pop and come off of it. But if I'm going through this first, it's actually pulling those pins into the stronger fabric, and it's not going to come out. So hang tight. I'm going to get the rest of this pinned on, and we will be ready to go here shortly. Okay, so now we have the back pinned on here. We're going to just simply pull it down to the front, and it hangs down below. I'm going to bring this up, again, just rewind my backing, but I'm not going to make it too tight. If you're doing this on a moxie, you're really going to want to leave a lot of gap in here, because you're not going to be able to do this next step. Because this next step, what I want to do is I want to disengage my ratchet, and I'm going to set my pole up on the top in the pole cradles. And this is really nice because it gives us the ability to easily work in our space or work in our batting between here. So now I'm going to take my batting and I have 90 wide batting, so I got to split this in half here. And this is where it's so much easier if you just for one person, they can do this all by themselves because we have that pole lifted out of the way. Otherwise, it gets to be really difficult if you have everything all down in place. So now that I have my batting, I'm going to tuck it up behind the batting bar so that I'm not stepping on it and getting it all dirty or stretching it. This is another reason why having a batting with a little scrim inside of it, like Warm and White and Warm and Natural does, helps keep it from pulling holes in it. Some of the battings are softer, like Dream Cotton and some of those ones, and they're nice battings. The wool battings are really great, but you got to be really careful that you don't step on it, you don't stretch it, because it'll really get out of shape in a hurry, and then you end up with lumpy quilts, and no one wants a lumpy quilt to start with. So once we're done with this, then we take this and we put our poles back down where it belongs. And notice that I'm not putting this the whole way to the back here yet. And there's a reason for that. I'm a little taller than most ladies, but even so, if I go and lean on this pole here, you see what can happen here? And if it's way back here, it's tempting when I'm going to be moving my machine along back here to lean against the pole. So why not just bring it up front here where I can work at it more easily and do it that way? So that's how we're going to do it. And I'm going to turn on my machine. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to baste a straight line across here. And that's going to enable me to have a straight line to pull my fabric up to and baste it down onto the quilt. So we'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want to baste this line across here, and I went and turned my lights off on the machine so that you don't have to, so that you can see better what's going on here without those bright lights. And so what I'm going to do here is I want to baste this across in a perfectly straight line. There's several ways you can do this. If you do not have Pro Stitcher, you can pull the machine forward. I'm going to pull it forward here so you can see what I'm doing here. But there's this little wheel down here, and these are what are called, I think they're called channel locks, mechanical channel locks. And what you do is you just put them across there, and that makes it harder to move so that you can then get a straight line across. And obviously I'd put that on there and put it right where I needed it to be. But if you have Pro Stitcher, you can simply turn on the horizontal or the horizontal channel lock, and then now that'll give me the ability to do a perfectly straight line. So I'm just going to do that, and then we're going to baste down our quilt. I forgot one thing yet. Before you do this, put your clamp onto the side of here, because it makes a big difference. When you're stitching, your thread has tension on it, and as you're moving it across here, you want that fabric to be held so it doesn't go the other way. Now, if on your machine, if you have an Amara, you want to go into the basting mode. But if you have an Avante, or you have a Moxie, or a Simply 16, you can go down to either a 4 or 5 stitches per inch. I don't recommend going any lower than that because it has to move so much while it's in the material. I prefer 5 because it doesn't flex the needle quite as much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my bobbin thread up through. And then I'm just going to simply make a big old basting stitch the whole way down the quilt. And now I'm going to just trim that thread. Okay, and now you can't see it because I used a very light colored thread on there, But now I'm going to take my channel lock off, and now I can bring out my quilt, and I'm going to just bring it up to that point. Now the benefit of this is that this line is perfectly parallel with the way the machine's going to stitch. So if I'm doing borders, if I'm doing edge to edge, it's going to make sure that all those rows are running perfectly straight. And that's going to make the quilt look a lot nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and baste this down here, and you can watch along and see how to do this. All right, so now I got it all lined up there, I'm going to baste the quilt in place. Now what I want you to remember is your foot is about a 1/2 inch wide. So it means from the needle to the edge of your foot is going to be a 1/4 inch or just a little bit less than that. So as long as you have the edge of your foot hanging over the edge of your fabric just a little bit, your binding should cover that up. But if you waver a little bit, it's okay. All of us have done that at times. And it means that you just have to pick out those bigger stitches, and that's why we use a basting stitch later. So again, I draw my bobbin thread up through by making one stitch, pulling it off to the side, and then I'm going to press the play button on my handlebars. That's the far right-hand button. Looks like a play and a pause. And now, as I do this, I'm going to stitch that down. Now, one of the things is sometimes it wants to push the material ahead of it. And so I find that if I just keep my hand behind it a little bit like this, it walks it into it and makes it a lot easier. And I don't have to go sit there and pin that all down later. Or I don't have to pin that and take those pins out later. So now when I get to the end there, I pull it off 6 inches, come back, make one stitch. If you're wondering why I'm doing it this way, go back and watch the other video that talks about how to tie off your quilt. They're white threads, so I can stick them in here. They're full of a little extra warmth. And now I'm ready to advance my quilt up so I can do more quilting. So I'm going to undo the clamp here, undo my front ratchets, and normally I'd get to the end there and crank it. I'll go down here so you can see what I'm doing. And as this comes up, I'm getting a little fold in my batting, so I'm just going to be working this in here, making sure I don't get any lumps in there. And now comes a critical part. How tight do you make your quilt? Some of you are in the habit of making this so stiff that you could bounce a ball off of here. But that's a bad news, because what can happen is your material is so stiff that as you're stitching, it's wanting to flex the needle. On your home sewing machine, you have feed dogs that move the material, and they only move the material when the needle's not in it. Well, you can't do that here because your needle is in it all the time. And so how are you going to do that? Well, by having your quilt loose enough, it can flex the fabric a little bit until it comes out, and that's where it's important to do it. So what I do is I tension my quilt back until I can reach in and I can grab my first digit of my finger up through it. Or another way is, you can't see it well from there, but if I'm rolling my machine back and forth, I can see the quilt going up and down over it as it comes past. That gives me kind of a general idea that it's not so tight on it. Because if you were having problems with thread shredding and thread breaking and you had no problems, you did the first row, it was fine, and now you do the second row, same thread, same bobbin, same needle, but all of a sudden it's skipping stitches and shredding, double check how tight you have your quilt top. This is a newbie mistake that a lot of people make, is that they really try to get those quilts way too tight. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to baste these edges down on the side, and then we'll be ready to quilt. And that is how you load your quilt for the first time. And I'm going to have more classes to come, so tune up as we talk about threading your machine, winding a bobbin, and and some of the basics of setting your tension and things like that. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.